So initially, I can just ask yourselves as panelists, if I start with yourself, Aruj, just very quickly, your role at the moment and where you are.
Great, thank you, David. It's a really exciting session indeed, and really humbled and delighted to be a part of it. You've asked me to be brief. I must say that is something that I'm going to struggle with, so please, everybody, bear with me. So my name is Aruj Haider, Chief Digital and Innovation Officer at Westminster City Council, something that actually David was a part of in his previous life. And my background is large-scale cultural transformation, change in program management and consulting. So technology is a new area for me. So I'm 2 months into the role. So in the space of work, moving from baby to toddler phase, but really enjoying every second, learning something new and turning into a bit of a geek. So that's me. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Alex.
Yep. Alex Benet. I'm a partner at KPMG here in Canada. Before that, I was the government CIO for Canada. So we're talking a whole whack of things that have traditionally not been impacting municipalities, but with the digital age, the national space and the municipal space are just absolutely crunching in so many different ways. So been working across the country and globally with municipalities on their smart initiatives, but really what I'm hoping we're going to get into today is about the culture shift and the people shift that's required, because it's not going to be about tech, it's going to be about the civil service at the end of the day, but I'm biased, so I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Great, thanks Alex. Miranda.
Thank you very much. I can't wait to pick up on that. So I work with the National Digital Twin Programme here in the UK, looking at facilitating the secure and resilient exchange of data to enable better outcomes and better decisions for all sorts of people. I also sit on the Mayor's Smart London Board and Infrastructure Advisory Panel, where we're trying to use technology to make London a smarter city for the people who live, work and visit there. And I would leave you with technology without a use case is a toy.
Absolutely. And I just saw the announcement around the planning stuff for Pan London. Interesting times. Cool. John.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. John Paul Farmer, I'm the Chief Technology Officer for New York City. I am going to steal Miranda's technology without a use case is just a toy line. That is so good. Happy to give you credit, Miranda. I've been in this role for a couple of years, and before this, I spent some time in the private sector in the tech world. And before that, in the Obama White House, working on tech and innovation and how we improve government itself. And the fun fact, the thing on the resume that doesn't really fit is that in my early days, I played a couple of years of professional baseball.
Ah, cool. Great. So welcome everybody, and let's get into the whole thing about smarter, fairer cities. First question I want to kind of throw out there is how much smarter and fairer do our cities need to be? And something I've always struggled with a lot of cities is what is the vision and where are we headed? I think it's fair to say cities have taken a bit of a hammering in the last 9 months. So if I just kick that off with John, actually, start with yourself. Your thoughts around that vision, where are we headed? How smarter and fairer do they need to be?
At the end of the day, smart and fair simply go hand in hand. It's really important that we ensure that technology, as Miranda pointed out, really is serving a purpose. And whether it's something as simple as a website or as sophisticated as artificial intelligence, we need to make sure that those technologies don't reinforce existing biases or inequities in our communities. And I look at a city, a smart city, and I say if a city isn't accessible for people with disabilities, if it isn't equitable for all, no matter their race or religion or socioeconomic status, then how smart is it? So when we use the term smart city, I think baked into that fundamental to that term needs to be equity and fairness.
Yeah, that's great. And Aris, just picking up on that, I mean, as you know, I worked in Westminster. The diversity, as you say, across the city is a constant challenge. Your thoughts around this around vision and direction?
I think it's really interesting, how we sort of position this in sort of cities, in the space of cities. I think one of my reflections is that perhaps a lot of time hasn't been spent, in councils and cities thinking about the vision and particularly what a role is in influencing that vision. And I think, one of the things that I've picked up from all of the panelists is it cannot be a technology push agenda. It has to be something we do for the good and betterment for communities. And therefore, I think a couple of reflections, on the role of technology and what we have seen in terms of the last 9 months. On one hand, we have seen the effect of the pandemic and how it adversely affects our, let's just say BME communities. On the other hand, we've also seen, how technology and it's a really simple technology in matching, let's just say those who are shielding, to those, to those who are volunteering, and how much of a positive impact that can play. So for me, the vision that a city, plays a role in is really setting that out clearly and having some key principles that guide it, going forward. So it's about inclusion, absolutely at the heart of it, left, right, and center, at the front of our minds. How can we make sure that using technology, we are accessing, the knowledge, the information, the opportunities and challenges from all parts of our communities? Westminster is so diverse. If you walk from Church Street and Hyde Park, you actually gain 10 years of your life in terms of life expectancy. So how can we leverage technology to understand those differences is really important. So inclusion at the heart of it. The other 2 points that I would see in the future vision are innovation. And when I say innovation, I don't just mean sexy, radical technology. It's innovation and how we approach, how do we deal with the communities going forward? So it's that mindset around experimentation, failing, and being okay about it and doing something different. And this is where involving our communities is also experimentation. So typically cities have also always done things themselves. This is what we know of, and here's the technology that we're going to push forward. But actually taking a step back, involving our communities, being brave and innovative and experimental in our approach is what is going to get us there. And the final thing I would say is participation, as well as sort of partnerships. So we're not in this alone. We're part of this big ecosystem. I think this lineup today is incredible. It's all across the world. So how can we leverage our partnerships, both big technology firms, cities, but also, our SMEs, our communities, and really helping us get there and influencing that. So for me, that's the role of the city, to influence that ecosystem, but really using these principles to guide us going forward.
Yeah, I remember vividly the days of walking up the Edgware Road and the shock on life expectancy. Yes. From one end of the road to the other. A real sort of awakening for you. Alex, what about at the Canadian level and looking across larger geographies?
Yeah, I'm going to try to go slightly different, just because, first of all, I agree with everything that's been said, but that would make for an extremely boring 30 minutes. So let's try to go slightly different. I think in order to get to a fairer city, we're going to need a different kind of leadership. I think everything that's been said to date so far makes a lot of sense. But the problem is the people that are in leadership positions grew up creating that environment, right? Whether they meant it or not, it doesn't matter, but they grew up supporting and leading that environment. So to get to fairer cities, we have to have hard conversations with people that are in positions that system works for them, right? And now, and it's, again, I was in that system, and so I get it. So I do think we're going to need a different kind of leadership, because the beauty and the scary part of technology is it's a mirror, right? And I think we talked about sort of biases earlier. If your data is biased and you're automating something, you're going to have to deal with it. So it gets to that tension point between the people that have inadvertently created systems of governance and systems of management of cities, and then the stuff that tech's going to put in your face because it just does it because it doesn't care. It's just, here it is. So I do think to get to fairer cities, it's going to be an absolutely different leadership conversation, and that's going to get to the heart of diversity at the top. Most civil service promote from time served, not necessarily a different type of hiring or lens. So I would think those are the human soft stuff. To get to fairer cities, we're going to have to go right at leadership, and they're going to have to get way more diverse, and they're going to have to do and deal with things that they may not be used to dealing with because data doesn't care, right? So.
Yeah, and that's a great play in, actually, Miranda. I'm glad I did it in this order, because straight over to the joys of the GLA.
Well, I wouldn't dream to speak for the GLA. They have their own private nightmare. I would just reflect on the number of UK cities I've worked with, that an unfair city is not a smart city, and the cities are extremely diverse. We've seen in the pandemic that cities which are entirely reliant on sort of weekday, day and daytime footfall have had a really different experience to those that, for example, have outdoor leisure facilities. And they respond, and they are different. And in the UK, certainly, they have a patchwork of accountability. So not everybody has accountability for healthcare. Not everybody has a joined up coordinated transport system. And so the answer is slightly different for all of them. But I think there are sort of three things that that a smart city agenda and vision should try and capture. It should, a city, and I use the term city loosely because if we just think about the city and don't think about the people who live there, who come to work there, who visit there, then that's another element of the diversity that we've neglected. So a place, and so I might reject cities, has to be a good place to innovate for the benefit of people, for in delivering services that benefit people, and in the delivery and the creation of those services or tools or processes, it should be a test bed which is expandable beyond the place for which it was invented. Because if you've just made your island extremely smart, there will be other. It's like you can't immunize against a pandemic by giving everybody in one village the vaccine. You have to help everybody.
No, that's really good, and playing it. I'm glad that we used the term, the phrase "place" there, because quite often cities, people just think urban centre. Actually, the complexity, the ecosystem around cities, I think is way bigger than that. And John, it'd be interesting to hear again from yourself, New York, and how are we going to outsmart the challenges we face now? The cities, I think, are looking at a very different landscape in the future, and how can technology help us with that? It'd be interesting to get your views around that stuff.
That's very true. The pandemic has accelerated this digitization of society. So all the trends that we saw before, telehealth, remote work, people accessing more government services online, they've all accelerated to where we thought they might be 5 or 10 years in the future. So the future has been pulled forward. And the reality is that tech is playing a bigger role in our lives, in daily lives than ever before. And it's unlikely that's going to go back to the way it was. So we need to embrace this. We need to figure out how we make this experience of using technology better for everybody. And when I think about what tech is doing and can do, it can make life better and more fair. It can also save money. And what we're seeing now, and we're likely to see in the near future, is more of the emphasis on the saving money. And I think our job as people who hold the keys is to make sure that we continue to bake in the fairness, the improvement, along with the saving money. Yeah. So the reality is there's financial pressure today that didn't exist a year or 2 years ago. But those constraints can also create opportunities. And I think if we are creative and thoughtful about the ways in which we deploy technology, we can achieve both cost savings that are going to be incredibly important and are going to actually create opportunities to do work that wouldn't have been otherwise, and do that in a way that improves lives in the process. So in some ways, it's being able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. And I was just playing that into Westminster, that tight geography, that 1 million people a day, 250,000 living there. Thoughts around how technology can help in that game?
So it's a really interesting question. And in fact, I was talking to my chief executive steward just before this, and we were trying to come up with an answer on that. And I think one of the things that we want to say is that I don't think that we can ever outsmart the challenges. There will always be challenges, and it's something you can see that you will have different types of challenges going forward. So I think the role that technology can play for certainly in Westminster is help us be more prepared to deal with those challenges, be more agile, be more flexible, so that when something comes up, and so obviously in this environment is the pandemic, but what else is there? It could be something else. And so with technology, how can we be better prepared to deal with those challenges and experiment with different solutions? So going back to what John said about looking at it from a different perspective, almost as an opportunity, how can we use technology to help us be more prepared and deal with those challenges as we go forward, is what I will say is how we are approaching things in Westminster.
Excellent. Great. And Alex?
Yeah, I'd say 3 things real quick. 3, and they're not tech related, but they absolutely are. It is just to go back to the earlier point, about saving money. Saving money absolutely happens, but you need to change your business model for that, right? And otherwise, it is just a toy. So what I mean by that is, why do governments at all levels still think they have the exclusive right to deliver services to citizens? Why can't they do that through ecosystems? And the answer is you can if you want to. You just need a different piece of infrastructure. So that's one element. The other element is that cities around the world aren't realizing that regulations or bylaws are a source of economic growth, right? And that it's first to market that actually wins. It's usually a term reserved for the private sector. But an example is General Motors has their autonomous vehicle testing center in Toronto, for the past decade. You would have thought that a Canadian city somewhere would have changed their regs somewhere to enable autonomous vehicle testing. No one did. The winner was Phoenix, Arizona, and that turned into hundreds of thousands of dollars of economic opportunity for the municipality. So that's the second element of it is your regs, your laws, your bylaws are super, super important for digital delivery. And the last part of it, I'd say, is procurement. Like we still do industrial age procurement where we measure things twice and cut once, but I can measure things 1,000,000 times in digital and never cut and never damage anything. So we're taking an industrial age approach to procurement instead of putting problems out on the street and letting the market figure it out to again create economic growth. So I think tech plays a big role, but I think if we don't change some of these things I just talked about, it'll be, frankly, pardon the expression, it'll be a little bit of lipstick on a pig where you haven't actually changed the underlying issues to foster the savings, foster the growth, foster the innovation. And that's the tough stuff that doesn't get elected people super jazzed, if I'm being honest. So, it's not the sexy app that, you can make an announcement around that you've changed your bylaws. So those are all things that to me are super important that I've picked up over the years.
No, and absolutely right on the procurement piece, and the whole commercial mindset in government is still kind of 3 years to get something done. 3 years in technology, that's an age. Miranda, your thoughts?
Oh, I love that one. I was on a lunch yesterday where somebody said, the minister wants to stand next to an aircraft carrier, not a data catalogue. How do you crack that? So I think what the pandemic has taught us is that we've all had a crash course in data. Absolutely, as John Paul said, the future has been brought forward onto us. We've had to learn how to interpret data and ask questions of data. That frankly is a delight. And certainly on the saving money point, I think there's an important nuance that we have to be mindful of here. When a lot of smart city projects started off a few years ago, they put LEDs in streetlights, and that's a good thing. CCTV is much better. You can detect crime much better under LED lighting. It's much cheaper. It's much better for the environment. It's a wonderful thing. But if all you did was bank the savings that those LED lights gave you and didn't reinvest in the vulnerable people who didn't benefit from that, you've missed the opportunity to invest in something that works for everybody. And so what we need to be careful about digital solutions is they may not work for everybody, and they will deliver a net cost saving. And we should be very careful about investing some of that cost saving in reaching or in making sure that the new business model, as Alex says, works for everybody and not just the people it's efficient and cheap to serve.
Yeah, and just building on actually, your LED streetlight model is a really good example of one that I've found interesting, where the LED streetlight's fine, but what we didn't do was look at the opportunity to consolidate other infrastructure into the pole. So we have lots of poles with lots of bits, so there's that kind of more strategic thinking around the physical environment that we're dealing with. I think is quite often an overlooked area around software and hardware not conjoining around some of those conversations. I see that's quite a challenge around the world. So thinking about our people, the one thing cities has got lots of is people. And thinking about how we can make better use of the skills and knowledge of our communities. So what I'm interested in hearing from each of you is how do we unlock that potential? Something I often refer to as kind of latent digital capability. We've got workforces and residents that know how to do everything on their phone, and we disempower them when they come into the workplace. What's that about? So how do we unlock that massive latent capability in cities? John, your thoughts around that?
Well, people is the key word. People are at the core of everything. That's why we do these jobs. It's who we serve, but it's also where the ideas come from. All of this technology is built by people. All the ideas, all the data, it all comes from people. Yeah. And one of the things we've realized is that nobody knows the needs of a specific neighborhood better than the folks who live there, who work there, who experience that specific hyper-local life every single day. And in New York City, we created something called CoLabs. It's a neighborhood-based innovation approach where we address specifically the communities that are historically under-resourced and too often overlooked. And we co-design with members of the community who often have very little tech experience themselves, but they do have their lived experience. We work with them on the priorities that they see every day. And then we work to identify where technology or a new approach might make sense. We've done this in Brooklyn on safety at night. We've done this in Manhattan on housing rights and mental health for youth, things that are especially relevant now in the midst of the economic challenges that have come along with the pandemic. So this neighborhood-based approach allows us to develop contextually relevant technology solutions so that we don't have simply technology toys, but we have real solutions going in to place. The other thing it does is it builds trust. It builds trust with the community so that people understand why these technologies are on a light pole, for instance. They understand the benefit that this is bringing to them and the people around them. And one of the things that's been fantastic is the ability to involve youth and young adults, folks who might not have been on a career path that involved technology, but through this engagement, we've been able to deliver skills to young people, high school students, university students in these communities. And it's been incredible to just see that this can be life-changing. So by identifying the neighborhoods that want to engage, that have needs, we're able to create models that can then be adopted by others too. So deep co-design with people who have these experiences is fundamental to the improvement that we're trying to make here in New York.
Excellent. I like that. Collabs, that's one to register. Iris, your thoughts?
So, we have just started on a journey on smart cities in Westminster, and I think very similar to what John has described. I mean, how we want to approach this going forward is very much a co-creation, community participation sort of approach as well. So what we don't want to do is come up with, okay, here's a list of ideas from us as a council, and then, this is something we are doing to you. So we are thinking about creating innovation hubs where we want to involve our communities, looking at different problems, opportunities, and then thinking about creative solutions. So I think definitely that's one element. I think the other thing is it's also a one size doesn't fit all. And I think, that's where, in the past, perhaps, councils or cities have, gone down the path of, so one size fits all, everybody needs these skills, so we're going to go and give you this training. Actually, people might not need that training. It might be something very different, whether it's, let's just quickly learn to code over here and apply something. Actually, my grandma is 65 and she's just learning how to use this phone. And look, she's doing her banking over here now. But actually, if I had given her training, she would have never done that. So I think, our communities are incredible. We always underestimate them for some reason. And going forward, one of the key, pillars of our approach is the community-led co-creation pillar. Absolutely. The other thing is that I want to touch on something that Alex said. It's something that's also very close to my heart around procurement. Because when I think about communities, I don't just think about the residents or the visitors. I also think about the SMEs, the market stall holders, and so on and so forth. And there's something about us, thinking about how we, work with them in a different way and being creative. Because otherwise, if you look at typical local government procurement rules, we will never be able to work with these guys over here because we'll always go with the big technology firms and all of that. So in order to get us over there, one of the things that we're also looking at is how do we think about procurement in a very different way. Let's move away from procurement and let's think about partnerships. And that is also at the heart of what our new approach is going to be on. And finally, the last thing is, it has to be a combination of some structured interventions plus that organic, sort of things coming out of the communities. What I mean by that is one of the things that we are really keen on is, digital apprenticeships. How can we make sure that, we are harnessing the talent in our communities, working with our partners, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's, other cities as well, to have apprenticeships programs that, that benefit our communities in the right way, but also focus, our attention to the skills that are needed. Again, not just vanilla programs, things that, add value. So things like that, also working with our, SMEs and how we can transfer the apprenticeship levy, for example, and invest in them so that we are able to work on the right outcomes. So I guess, just to summarize, it's a combination of some structured and some organic approaches, but at the heart of it all is how do we involve our communities and our businesses and SMEs and be creative in our approaches going forward.
Yeah, absolutely community driven. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say one thing on internal skills and one thing on community skills. On internal skills, I would love to see the day where municipalities stop hiring within the municipality and actually apply digital hiring to the problem. So I think Barbados was the first out of the COVID gate, announcing a 12-month COVID visa, program to work from the beach. I nothing against the UK, certainly nothing against Canada, but I would much prefer working on a beach in Barbados than working where I'm about to work over the course of the winter. So, and the point here being is you're not getting the best talent if you're limiting yourself to industrial age hiring. So number one, so that would be in the internal suggestion. The other thing is I absolutely agree with everything that's been said on sort of the co-creation. One of the elements that's often overlooked for co-creation is you have to release the data, right? And that the more you release the data, the more you are radically transparent and open, the cooler things can happen, because you're not the source of innovation in most parts of, if you're government, like why wouldn't you leverage everybody else around you? So I was the president and CEO of our national museums here in Canada. We started batch releasing data every 2 hours. It was ugly, it was messy. We started doing video games with Nintendo in Japan. We started doing documentaries with the Smithsonian, and none of those things we went looking for. It came to us. But it came to us because we were aggressively going into the market, so to speak, and saying, here's our data, what can we do with it? You know, how do we shape it? How do we do this? What's the solution? And so I think it's a combination of absolutely co-creation, of radical openness, of changing how you do procurement, and then getting the civil service used to talking about relinquishing some of the controls that it's had in order to let people co-create, right? So very, very different way of managing things, which frankly could scare a lot of people, you know, in the administration, but actually ends up being a lot less riskier this way, a lot more rewarding, to John Paul's point, and a lot more inclusive in sort of the way that cities go about doing a business.
Yeah, that's good. Cool. Miranda.
Oh, brilliant. I'm going to disagree. I love this. So you've all said brilliant things, and I agree with you in many ways. But there's a difference between free speech and free beer. And unless we, both as municipalities and as private enterprises, start regarding our data as an asset, we're not going to do the radical pivots. We're not going to change the business model that Alex suggests. So in the UK, I'm a great user of Citymapper, which is the way that aggregates a service that aggregates transport data and enables me to get across the city more efficiently. The answer is with bicycle. And they do that because TfL give away data to make people better users of public transport, and that's a great thing. But I am appalled as a citizen that Citymapper is in a position to sell back data that TfL gave it. You know, the business which Citymapper created was based on TfL giving it data. And then Citymapper is now in a position to say, you don't serve these communities, you don't do these journeys, let us tell you. We've now built a service. And so transparency and having a cognizant view about what data assets you're giving away that enable you to expand your reach and do great things and expand your business is a wonderful thing. But we've got to be much more grown up about the opportunities and risks presented by data, not only by our own data, but the data that can be aggregated with. And if people are only talking about cyber, they've got a really good point, but they haven't got the whole story.
Yeah. Can I just jump in, because I think I agree. I agree with what you said. I think it requires a whole different set of skills that we don't have. I think that, for example, governments that issue driver's license should let the insurance company issue driver's licenses instead, because it would be easier for me. Well, that assumes that the government that's releasing the data has privacy understandings in a digital age, cyber, service, monetization, all skills that they may, or I would say often may not have, because it's a new thing, right? So I completely agree with you, just absolutely, just to, so that we don't disagree because I'm Canadian.
I mean, one of the big success stories on digital, as we know, in the UK was the complete transformation of vehicle excise duty. And the reason that was able to be done was they had a fundamentally different conversation with the motor industry and the insurance industry along exactly the lines you described. They didn't seek to make profit from the data. They recognized aggregation of data from multiple sources would give them what they needed to fundamentally change that business model. Right answer, yeah? Yeah, cool. So we're just about out of time, so we've got just enough time to get a quick last shot in, which is biggest lesson we've learned from 2020 and how you're going to make your cities better in 2021. There you go. No small ask, John.
I think when I look at what's happened in 2020, I think about a children's show that I grew up watching, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, where they taught little kids about the world. And Fred Rogers said that in times of crisis, look for the helpers. And one of the things that we've seen this year is so many people stepping up to help, to contribute on the technology front. Data scientists, web developers, all kinds of user research folks have stepped in through programs we've created, like the NYCX Innovation Fellows, which we stood up this ability for us to do quick sprints to quickly augment the size of our team to meet the need. This was done in collaboration with folks in the nonprofit sector, the U.S. Digital Response, And we've been able to do things like fight hate crimes, put in place continuous translation, help expand broadband. So really critical things in this time, because we've been able to augment our ability, our capacity, by identifying the helpers, the folks who raised their hand and said that they want to be a part of this. And I expect that to continue in the years to come.
Brilliant. Aruj.
I've got I think I'm going to answer this a little differently. I've got a personal reflection and a professional reflection. My personal reflection is my family is most important, and it's something that I want to always prioritize. I've got 2 beautiful kids, and I don't want to give up on that, ever. But equally, I've got a career and I love my job. I get out of bed every morning thinking about what else I could do, and there's no reason that I need to prioritize one over the other. And I think the biggest lesson for me personally is that I can't have it all. And I think technology is helping me get there. And I think, as cities going forward, we need to think about that, and how do we empower not just our staff, but also our communities, and being in charge of their time in the way that, works for them. So for me, you can have it all, and there's no reason that you put family at second best. I don't want to miss out on those cuddles, with my beautiful boys. I think the other thing is that, on a more professional way, is something that is, really, so COVID has shown a light on, again, how the BME communities have been more adversely affected. And I think similarly, what we've seen in terms of the killing of George Floyd, that has also shown a light on, actually, there's still a lot more to do, in terms of diversity and inclusion. We are not there. We cannot just stop. We cannot stop thinking about it. We cannot stop doing things about it. It's the time when we need to, double up our efforts more than ever as well. And technology and digital, gives us a huge opportunity to think about how can we be more inclusive in our approach going forward. So smart cannot be a thing on its own. I think the biggest lesson for a city going forward is really thinking about how do we make sure that we are being inclusive in approaches. But actually, there's a point to it. When you think about inclusion and diversity, you're actually thinking about innovation, creativity, and the right outcomes for your society going forward. So personal and professional reflection.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, I think it's one of yours that said, never let a good crisis go to waste type of thing. And like I say, I'm fully understanding the health and the personal impacts of COVID, but I would hate the good things that came out of COVID from a digital perspective around everything that my colleague just said earlier. Just kind of the elastic to snap back, in a year from now, because I think that this situation has made us think that, the internet has to be for everybody now. It's now the 4th utility. Right. And it's not just accessibility in region, it's affordability in major cities as well. In Canada, we have one of the highest internet personal rates. I think it's about $120, for access per month to my cell phone. For you, John Paul, that's like $1 American, but like in Canada, it's a lot of money, and not every region can afford it. So we need to rethink some of these things. I'm hoping that it also creates a sort of redesign of city cores. If you think about it, just going into work and going to your office is very much industrial age. If you think about it as a construct and you take a step back after COVID, you're like, well, why was I doing this? Right. So I think that there is an opportunity to redesign our cores, like this cores of cities, into something completely different. So I'm kind of hoping we see this opportunity to continue leapfrogging, and that we don't revert back to sort of the, oh, well, now we can go back to normal kind of thing, because the normal maybe didn't work for a lot of people, is what we're hearing on the call today.
No, and I'm loving that 10-20 minute city kind of thinking that's been coming out, which is all about that, how you can get to where you need to get to, rather than going on the old tram tracks on mass transit, really. Miranda, your thoughts?
So as ever, my fellow panelists have been stellar. So I think we have the opportunity to reinvent what the office is for. I'm a bit scared that people will want me to go in the office one day a week and be creative on that day. Certainly we've learned what you can do digitally, but we initially fell into the trap of doing what we did in the office, but trying to do it remotely. And now I think we're learning that that's not the best use of time. So, what does the new hybrid model look like? So I think 2020 has given us the opportunity to explore what new models might be. And I think, as more of us embrace a hybrid model, that'll have an effect on people's working lives, but also what an urban centre or a high street look like. Because certainly where I live, people will be less inclined to do long commuting, and are more invested in their community in the year that follows than they might have been 12 months ago. And how do we use that as John and Alex and Aruj have said, to leverage everywhere becoming smarter and allowing better outcomes for everybody.
Absolutely, and that appreciation of community, our surroundings, our places is so much sharper, so much richer now than it was this time last year. It's been fascinating to see that play through. So that's all the time we've got, and thank you very much. I think that was a great set of conversations, great set of feedback, and some interesting similarities, you know, across those, and a little bit of disagreement. Always good to have. Excellent. So John, Alex, Aruj, Miranda, thank you very much for putting in some high quality stuff over that.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.